All right. It looks like this. Go live. What? Okay. Well, it's not up on YouTube for whatever reason. I don't know why. It seems like there was 2 different ones that were made for whatever reason, but here we are. Thank you everybody for being on the show tonight. We have with us Chris Francisque. He is just quite foundational on the show in terms of the encouragement and the wisdom he has provided me along the way, and I appreciate him for that. We also have Jesse Hennig. He has been a writer, producer, the guy behind the scenes. He's helped us out so much. So here he is today. And then we have Bobby, another wonderful guy. He's the audio technician, but also completely, totally instrumental in all aspects of this show. So I figured that on Wednesdays, we could sort of have something more topical. And all 3 of you guys bring something to this. Now, of course, for those listening, there's a comment section. So please be sure to share that. I think there might be an echo.
So, no, it's just you went live on Facebook and I opened it, but
okay.
You're good.
Good. Okay. Well, then it works.
It works.
So
brilliant.
You guys all bring something very unique philosophically to the conversations that we talk about. Jesse, you are very how shall I say, you're very powerful in your emotions. You're sensitive in a wonderful way that you can provide insight in that aspect to things, such as your own experiences. Bobby, you are very much you're upward in sort of your approach. You don't become too emotional on one side or the other, which is wonderful. And then what's that?
I'm a robot.
No, you're not a robot. You're not I wouldn't say you're a robot, but you definitely you're able to stay controlled and disciplined in an argument. And then there's Chris, who is probably one of the most intense people I've ever met in the best sense of the word, because when he feels something, man, he brings it to the table. And every time I've walked away scratching my head being like, shit, he really got me on that one. I have to change the way that I think to incorporate the wisdom that he provides. So, and then there's me, and I'm just, well, as you guys all know, I'm kind of all over the place. So Forgettable Vendetta, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So what I wanted to talk about today is education, trauma, and healing. And I think that in today's day and age, education is, well, first of all, it's the future, but in what direction is it taking? And it'd be nice to kind of incorporate our experiences with education and to get a sense of, where we've come from and where we're going. And is this helpful for children? Are your experiences were those positive ones? So I don't know if one of you guys would like to go first on this. And by the way, for those who are commenting, I don't know if you guys can see it, but feel free to chime in and we'll try and incorporate you guys into this as well. So now, Chris, you and I, we went to the same high school.
Yes, we did.
Right. And I've since been back to our high school as a substitute teacher, and it's changed so much, right? Like when we went, it was very monocultural.
That's a nice way of putting it.
So do you mind sharing sort of how your experiences were in high school? Because I think, and let me preface this by saying this, is that high school is such a vulnerable time in anybody's life, right? Especially nowadays with technology and, there's things like cyberbullying. It can just seem that your experiences at high school can be more than ever like a prison if they're negative ones. So,
yeah, well, I mean, I spoke about it on the, a little bit on the episode, that we had last year, but no, I'm born in Montreal, and then I grew up in a city on the south shore of Montreal called Saint-Hubert, or Saint Hubert for the Anglophones. And then yeah, there was a nice mixture of different ethnic groups. Just because Montreal is quite diverse, and then sort of the further you get out of Montreal, it sort of becomes a little bit more homogenous depending on what direction you're going. But through I guess elementary school, like pretty much all the way to grade 3, that's when I was in Saint-Hubert, and then I left to Mississauga, Ontario, which was even more diverse. Like, I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but when I was would have been called middle school, it was like every class that I had an equal amount of every sort of ethnic group, whether it was Asian, West Indian, African, European. There was like an equal amount, so that you never felt othered. And then I left halfway through grade 8, and then I moved to Cloverdale, which is Clayton Heights, where we went. And that was a very different experience, because it was just, I remember coming, I think it was like the second week of like the second semester. And so I came in, and I remember going in with the I guess guidance counselor, who was giving me like my class schedule. And I walked into the class, and it was just a sea of white faces. It was just white everywhere. And I mean, that was Mr. Hall. It was social studies class. And I remember the first thing he said, he looked at me and he was just like, "Oh, okay, this is going to be interesting."
Right.
And I was just like, "All right, well, there it is." And yeah, that was the first time I ever felt like, all eyes are on you. It's very, it was very, very different. And that was really the first time I was made aware in the, I guess, social context of what it meant to be Black, and how other people saw that, and the things that you had to live up to, and the expectations that they placed on you without even knowing. And that caused a bit of, I would never, I wouldn't say that I was bullied in high school or anything like that, but it was just, it became difficult to live up to expectations that are not set. It's not even me setting my own expectations, not even my mom setting these expectations. It's society based on what they think you should be.
Right. So there was a stereotype that people thought you had to fit.
Oh, very much so.
And was that from teachers and students?
Teachers, no, I never really had that. No, it was never. It was just really like, it was the my classmates that really had that that placed that expectation on me. And then when you don't meet it, just because I'm my own individual, and I don't fit. I'm not going to fit into a mold that you've made. The version of me that you created is not my responsibility to live up to. So I just never lived up to it, and it creates this sort of dissonance, and this sort of like, well, this is not what I know the portrayal of Black people to be, and you don't fit into that, which is a very easily digestible box, and you don't fit into that, therefore you must not be that, and it sort of creates this tension.
Well, and you bring up a good point there too, and by all means, boys, jump in. Auntie JoJo, whew, well said.
That's Angela. That's my best friend.
There you go. Hello, Angela. Thank you for joining.
How's it going?
I
think I could jump in here on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like people kind of expected you to, like you said, if they expected you to be a certain way, and when it wasn't the case, then people kind of just were like, "Whoa, what's going on? This isn't the way that things are. You're not doing the thing you're supposed to do." But I mean, that was kind of, high school is all about, like, you're supposed to fit into these blocks, and if you don't fit into these blocks, then you kind of just fade away into the the darkness and the black in the corner. And I mean, I don't really know where I'm going with saying this, but it's, everybody kind of has these expectations put on them in high school, and if you don't meet them, you kind of just, it's like you got to get with it or just leave. Like, we'll just move on from you.
Yeah.
And so I guess, it's for someone like yourself, if that's being put on yourself and you're not kind of meeting it. I mean, is it making you feel terrible? Is it making like people think that that's wrong? Like, are you breaking the mold, or are you just kind of getting passed off?
Well, yeah, and I mean it depends on the type of person, because there are some people that, maybe for lack of a better word, don't have the type of will or personality to sort of remain themselves in that. They sort of get lost in the mix and then become that which they're told they should be. And I mean, I'm lucky that I had, my best friend Angela, who is also, she's Black, and we shared a lot of experience. We had classes together, and there were times where we'd look at each other and be like, did they really just say that? It was like moments and stuff where you're thankful that you have that person to experience that with you, because I think we were like one of 7 or 8 Black kids in a school of like at least 1,000, not.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time I saw her, I think it was in like communications or computer class or something like that. And I just remember seeing her, and I was just like, oh, and then we just became friends really, really quickly, but we bonded over that. But she was, again, another person who is still to this day an individual. And it was nice to have that, because it becomes easier to, be yourself when you have somebody as well standing alongside with you, saying that I'm also not going to be this version of a Black woman that people expect for me to be. So it becomes easier when you have somebody to stand with you as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
You break first if you're by yourself. You kind of just fall in line because you don't want everyone staring at you and looking at you like, oh, he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And in high school, everyone kind of has that same mentality where if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, you got to go, man. You're not part of the pack anymore.
Well, I can only imagine now, because like when I was in, when we were in high school, like social media, I think, what was the thing called, like Nexopia or something like that?
Nexopia.
That was like, MySpace. But social media was not really a thing. Like it was, I think we had like MSN chat or whatever like that, like after school. I remember that was the biggest thing. But I can only imagine now. I can only imagine now that like, the way that bullying has evolved in a way, like I'm sure that bullying happens like in real time now, and then it just spreads because like a lie can make it around the world twice over, and the truth is just putting its shoes on. So I can imagine now in high school all of the narratives that bullying is probably just so much more. It is an easier, more expedient thing, I guess, now, just because you have social media, and
it doesn't stop. You go home at night and it continues.
It keeps going and going and going. And I'm sure, like, I truly don't know how kids, do it these days. And I mean, you look at like suicide rates and things like that, which have skyrocketed. But it was like, I don't know, like back when we were in high school, it was almost like bullying was this thing where it was just like, that's part of the high school experience. And now it's really a thing that it's like, no, this could really cost you your life if you're a person that just, when it becomes all consuming, like, you used to be able to leave school and at least, okay, let me leave it there. And, I go home, not think about it. You turn on social media now and people still be talking about you. So.
Shout out to Thomas. He says, I know what bullying is like. I was bullied from kindergarten to grade 12. Another guy we went to high school with. Thank you for joining us, Thomas. I mean,
but what's crazy is that all the people, it's this weird switch that happens. All the people that were bullied in high school now are doing very, very well for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
All the people who were doing it, let me tell you something.
Are losers. Yeah.
Okay? Just fat and balding and nothing else nice.
I don't know if you noticed, I got bullied a lot as a kid too. And like, I got bullied every day, all the time. And I decided, being a small, scrawny kid, I decided the best thing for me to do was turn into an emo kid. So give people more ammunition to kind of just keep firing at me.
Yeah.
And,
embrace it.
Yeah. But it's funny now. You talk to the people that you met in high school, the people that said the same things, like, and you know what, I'll say what they said. They're like, hey, you're a fag. Why don't you go cut your wrist, go kill yourself, all that stuff. And it sucked. It hurt my feelings a lot. But now they look back on it and they're like, oh man, I'm really sorry that I said all these things to you. And I'm like, guys, you know what? I'm still here. You didn't break me, but I guess I appreciate you saying sorry. But everybody realizes that they
Yeah, I had somebody come up in a mall and just basically like they recognized me and they were just, they're saying, we went to high school together and then, I remember like I used to say really, nasty things about you and I'm, just want to say I'm sorry. While I appreciate the sentiment, I was very honest and I'm like, I'm very sorry, but I don't even remember you from high school, so I'm really sorry. Good for you for apologizing though.
Yeah.
What about you, Bobby? How was high school for you?
It was all right. I was more of the chameleon type, different classes. I'd be friends with different people, but I wouldn't be friends with them all the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in my Aldergrove high school where everyone's white, so you just blend right in, right? Actually, I made friends with in a lot of English classes. One of my best friends, his name was Perry Brar. Freaking love that guy. He still lives near me. He's a beauty. But we'd always, I would always get. I was part of the cool group for the most part, but I was on the low end of the cool group. And I don't even think I was part of it. I think I was just like the kicking stump. I'd always be like the butt of every joke, and I was like the weird, quiet kid all the time. So I had to like chameleonize, like go around and just basically try to disappear. All my life I've been the quiet dude. So kind of, Chris, to your point of, the people that got bullied kind of rose up and the people that were doing the bullying stayed down. I don't think I really changed. I think I'm still like the quiet kind of like chameleon type, but
you're Switzerland.
Right. What's that?
I said you're Switzerland.
Yeah.
You're just neutral.
Basically neutral in every way. I love it though. I've never been one for the spotlight, which I believe you're an actor, right, Chris? So
yes,
that just scares the living shit out of me.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. Even just talking right now, I can feel how nervous I
am. Well, one of
you look sharp.
We'll run a scene together. We'll help you there. We'll run a scene.
Oh, dope.
Yeah. There you go.
So, because why I brought this up too is that Chris and we were talking about cancel culture. And how, I have some troubles with it because I feel like if you just cancel somebody, it really kind of almost, it can exacerbate the radicals, right? Because they're like, oh, look at that. They're taking them out. And then that person who's been canceled falls into that category or whatever, right? It seems that the cancel culture, there's always been a strange marriage between the right and the left. And as far as I'm concerned, I think they almost need each other, right? Like a toxic relationship. You need that other person in order for that to work, right? So Chris and I were talking about, my difficulties with that, my commentary on that. And he said that there's a difference between tolerance and acceptance. Now, I've always understood tolerance as like, who wants to be in a room where you're just tolerated by people, right? Like, how good would that feel? Versus being in a room where people accept you. However, from a legislative standpoint and from an educational standpoint, we need to teach people about tolerance and making policies that are about tolerance, not so much on acceptance, right? Acceptance comes later, but tolerance, well, actually, I think Chris explained it quite well, if you don't mind sharing your...
Well, they came from the you'll have to forgive me because I've forgotten his name already. The episode with the right-leaning guy, whatever his name is,
William Gardner.
That one.
You equated him to Windows 95 that kept refusing to reboot.
He's like a Windows 95 operating system that refuses to like update. It's just like, but it could be so much better. And he's like, no, I like 95. So it's just that's what he felt like. It was just a really old system, which is But yeah, you were saying that forced tolerance is not a good thing, and it doesn't work, and it makes people sort of go the other way. And then I texted you and I said, well, there's a distinction. The word that you're looking for is acceptance, because tolerance is what allows us to live in a functioning society. Like laws force you to tolerate each other. I don't care if you don't like this person based on their personality, the color of their skin, whatever. You can't just do whatever you want to them because you don't like them. You must tolerate them by law. Acceptance is a personal choice that you make. That is, not only do I tolerate you, but I have chosen as well to accept you as my equal, as my whatever, but I'm choosing that. Now, the problem becomes when you force acceptance, which you have a lot of groups now, like what, you know, in the name of social justice, that will say, you must accept me. And anytime that you force that on somebody and you don't allow a person to evolve through their own journey to acceptance through education and educating themselves, you're going to breed resentment, and then it's going to push the person even further away, where they're like, no, because you're forcing the process that I'm not even allowed to decide if I want to accept you. But tolerance is the thing that we have to understand that has to and should be forced, because without it, Black people would still be getting lynched. There are laws that say you must tolerate Black people. You just have to. And even then, even nowadays, there are still loose interpretations of what that actually means to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think?
I'd say when acceptance is forced, it's just not genuine, is it? You don't have that genuine, like, I actually do accept you. If you're forced, then it's almost like putting a veil over it. And you're like, oh yeah, I'll put on a nice face and accept it for you, then go home and bash whatever you want, you know. Now that we have the internet and stuff, you can go talk to whoever you want and bash whoever is that you're trying to accept. And that, but
you can always find like-minded individuals too.
That way you love from the heart if it's actually genuine and accept somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, make an example of it right now. Like, take it back to when Black Lives Matter became a big event. There was a lot of people that were pushing back with the All Lives Matter, you know, including, I'm sure many of us have friends or family members that they would always kind of ask you. And like, I was an advocate for it. I was like, you know, whatever. Yeah, all lives matter, but that's not the point right now. And that was what you're saying, Chris, is almost like forced acceptance. And that's why everybody was pushing back on it so much, because they were like, okay, you don't have a choice anymore. Now you have to do this.
But to what I say to that, when people would rebut with, because it's almost like they're making it too easy at that point, when they would rebut with, well, all lives matter. And I said, all right, well then by extension, if all lives matter, then the statement Black Lives Matter makes sense then. Because if you're saying all of them, and that's what I said on the episode as well that you and I had, Rob, was that there is no silent only or more at the end of Black Lives Matter. It is the most basic baseline statement, we matter, period. But people would hear this weird only or more at the end of it, and then it would, well, all lives matter. I was like, fair point. However, if you're saying that, then by extension, under the umbrella of all, that would mean Black as well. So it would just be this weird thing where people would just do these weird mental gymnastics to sort of push back on it. And for me, it was always like, listen, if we're in 21 and you still have to be told that Black lives actually do matter, then you're probably not the type of person that I want to engage with anyways, because it's such a base, piss poor, lowest common denominator way to start a conversation. Black lives matter, duh. If you still need to be told that,
yeah.
I don't, you're operating on Windows 95, I guess.
Yes. And I think that some people, when they read, because it's like text messages. So many of us, we have to include an emoji after that, so people know that we're not being, like rude, or to set what it is that we're saying. Right. And I think that people would read, Black Lives Matter, and they would interpret it as, well, only Black Lives Matter. And maybe they felt threatened, which, to your point, Chris, it's like, no, it's clearly, in the systems that may be, Black lives are not treated as equal, right? That's why there's this movement.
Yeah, and it's like all lives can't matter until the Black ones do. So ask yourself why people are even saying this in the first place. It didn't just pop out of thin air. It's just been a long process getting here, and it's just it's crazy that the first recorded instance of police brutality against a Black person was Rodney King in '94, and then we have and even back then with video evidence, they were able to not convict the policeman that did that to him. And then, you know, up until, you know, with George Floyd, I was pretty nervous. I was pretty nervous that I was like, even with this evidence, because we've seen it time and time and time again, you have all the evidence laid out in front of you, and somehow these people don't get convicted because it's like, oh, well, you know, it's loosely interpreted. But this one, I was at least thankful that while I wouldn't call it justice, I would call it accountability for once.
So let's ask this here, guys. Are we, as a society, are we being forced, do we feel like we're being forced to accept all these different things? And is that why we've had to change things like tone and, you know, add a bunch of emojis to things? Are we just tolerating things? Or have we by doing so, have we created this hypersensitive society that we can't take anything because we've been told, okay, you have to do this and you don't have a choice? And then as resentful tolerance, like, are we shooting ourselves in the foot?
Well, I mean, I don't think that, like, in our society, you can have as many feelings as you want, right? But at the end of the day, you have to have some awareness. Like, there was that chick who, sorry, how about that for gendered language? But anyways, there was that person on The Mandalorian, and she was like, to be a conservative these days is like to be a Jew in 1941. And it's like, listen, bitch, that is in no way a comparison. Okay. You're not having to wear a Star of David on your arm. You're not being forced into concentration camps. That's not a comparison, right? That's not a comparison. That's so far out of it.
Stop using the Holocaust. The Holocaust is so unique of a situation in history. There is nothing else like it, where you systematically just exterminated over 6 million people like that. So when people are like, oh, this person is like Hitler, this is like the Holocaust, it's like, no.
Right.
It's
right.
So when people make, like I said, I don't agree with a lot of cancel culture. Do I think things need to be canceled? It depends. I think that, like, in terms of like things like, you know, Harvey Weinstein, that was something that should have been canceled a long time ago. R. Kelly, a long time ago. And so there are certain things where it's just like, you have done so much damage that the redemption arc is not even, I can't even see it for you.
There's no coming back from this.
There's no coming back. But what I always say is that this generation would have never allowed Malcolm Little to become Malcolm X, because with Twitter, you're just going back. Let me dig back as far as I possibly can to find something that looks mildly incriminating and wrench it out of context of time. Because the analogy that I gave you of the, you know, imagine when we were going to Clayton Heights, everything around us was like farm. It was just farm everywhere. There were no condos. There was no mini malls. It was farm everywhere. So the speed limit was different. Now that it's like residential areas, the speed limit has changed. But imagine if you had a policeman knock on your door and go, well, you were driving this speed limit, you know, back then, so I have to give you a ticket. You're like, yeah, but I was driving it back then because that's the speed I was allowed to go. It's the same thing with political correctness as it travels through time. When, you know, it's like that saying that Maya Angelou has, which is, when you know better, you do better. But throughout time, things that were acceptable in the 1920s were not acceptable in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, go on and so forth. So, but that's the thing, is that people now don't even give context to something. They're like, you said this thing that we now know is unacceptable, but I'm going to hold you to the standards of now for back then. And that's where you have this thing that it's just like, but you can't do that. Otherwise, we'd all be canceled, because we've all said, you know, and you can even through Facebook, where they have that, you know, things that you said on this day 2 years ago. And I cringe at some of the things. I'm like, oh my God.
I think we all do. I think that's a collective.
Yeah.
But imagine now if you had people that were like, no, we're not even going to allow you the opportunity to have evolved beyond that. We're going to hold you to what you were back then, and you can't evolve beyond that, and now you have to be canceled. And it gives people this sort of rush of power, like, I'm able to, especially because, you know, when you're talking about celebrities, which we in our culture deify, if you can cancel and take away a celebrity's livelihood, imagine how, for someone who has 2 followers on Twitter to be able to do that, to say I took this away. It's quite powerful of a feeling to do that.
Well, I mean, cancel culture is really something in terms of the left. I mean, it's kind of like, it's like in communist countries when there's a monoculture, anybody who dissents dissolves. They just disappear, right? And that's kind of what cancel culture is. It really is an embodiment of an extreme left. And as a consequence, the alt-right and all this other shit is popping up. Yeah. And we need to identify that. And that's why I think education, again, as you're saying, Chris, you know, the Harvey Weinsteins, a really good example is Sharon Osbourne. She was given so many fucking chances to like snap out of it, and she was refusing. And as a consequence, game over, man. But she had so many chances. And I think that was a really good example of like, okay, Sharon, like, come on, like, at least try.
Yeah, you're given the opportunity to become better, to learn something, and you're like, no. So I think at that point, where people are like, and that's where you have to take, at that point, your own. It's your own responsibility to educate yourself, because the people that were trying, the Black women who were trying to educate Sharon Osbourne in that instance, were trying so hard to be like, I'm giving you, you know, I'm educating. It's not even my responsibility to educate you. You know,
what you asked for, what she asked for.
What she asked for. She literally said, educate me. And they were, and she still was like, no.
Which isn't their job. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's what I say to people. I'm like, Google is free. You literally can type in any question that you have, and Google will come up with thousands of answers for you. Yeah. But
although you do have to be careful, because what you search in Google, it kind of almost tells you what you want to hear, because there's so many things out there.
Yeah,
right? But you are right. You are right. Prime time is not a good time to get educated.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But
like
I think that's where sort of canceling someone is, you know, I don't know, a bit more. And like I said, I don't feel bad for people like Sharon Osbourne who have millions upon millions of dollars. Like, oh God, you're not on a TV show anymore. Wow. But then again, it's a further extension of like, well, how far can we take it? And I think the farther left you go, we've seen that unless you have sort of the same group mentality, that you are now at risk if you don't say the politically correct thing, that whatever has been decided. And that's what, you know, I saw a comment Angela was saying. She's like, well, who decides what's politically correct? And I think, like I said, I think media decides a lot. Whoever controls the narrative can decide this is what's acceptable. And there's a lot of times where I don't fully say everything that I'm thinking. One, because it's not necessary to always say everything you're thinking. And then two, I was taught very, you know, at a young age that there are certain things that it's called kitchen table talk, where stuff that you wouldn't really utter outside of the confines of your kitchen table with your most trusted and loved friends and family. Because again, there are some people now, you know, with social media, they can really, damage can be done. So not everything needs to be spoken.
Well, and I am looking at the comments here, and I'd love to bring some of that into this. But yes, it's Angela, right? Angela's.
Yeah.
I feel like we got to get her on the show, man.
Angela is great to have on the show. Oh yeah, you should have Angela on the show.
So it says Angela, excuse me, says, I agree with the slogan Black Lives Matter, but I disagree with the organization. Well, I mean, I'll be honest, man. I have a hard time trusting any organization.
Yes.
But that's a great point. There's a difference between the movement and the organization, and a lot of people who lack the awareness or that kind of education piece, they're associating them as synonymous, as one and the same, right? And that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Right.
What do you guys think about that? I just want to make sure that we're getting some of these points here.
Sorry, I was reading comments when you were just saying that.
Good. We got Danny Stone on here. Okay, so people cancel you if you don't believe what the majority believes. People, I mean, there it is again. There's that monoculture.
And that's easier because, like, you know, take it back to high school. It's the same mentality. It's the pack mentality. You're different, and I don't like it, and you're gone. And so cancel culture is almost kind of, it's like we've built this society where bullying has gotten worse and cancel culture has gotten worse, and it all kind of is just snowballing, and we have the opportunity to stop it. We could put a wrench in and like completely stop it, but it's easier for people to go along with it than it is for them to stand up and be somebody that says, hey, you know what, I don't actually agree with that. I don't think it's okay.
Well,
It's easier to be the pack.
And that's breaking the because there is sort of complicit bias, right? Like, you know, somebody will tell you like a bunch of white people are in a room and they'll tell you a joke, or, you know, those people, and everybody's like, oh yeah, yeah. But even though they don't want to nod their heads or whatever, but there's that sort of societal pressure or something that well, actually, Chris's dad said it very well, Rodney. He said, you get along to go along, right?
Yeah.
And that's difficult for some people.
I was literally
right?
just about to say that.
Yeah. But again, it's like, what's easier, right? And sometimes you got to sacrifice your comfort for what's right. Sorry, Chris, you're going to say something.
No, I was going to say it's also difficult to cancel something or someone that doesn't care if it is. So for me, for instance, when I am prepared to say something, if I feel like it's worth saying, I am prepared for all of the repercussions of that, because with every action is an opposite and equal reaction. So if I'm saying something, I have already in my mind thought, well, this is what X, Y, and Z, you know, they're going to think, and, you know, what if, you know, but I don't live my life based on what other people think of me. However, I am an actor, so I understand that the medium that I'm in is a lot of to the left, very left leaning, and very have to be politically correct, especially in Vancouver. But I'm just not, again, if you don't care, it becomes a bit more difficult. Now, yes, there are certain people who can control if you're, you know, hired or not, but if you know that you have multiple avenues that you can go down to get hired, and you're just like, I'm standing by what I said. This is why I said, you know, I think what I said. This is why. This is how I came to that conclusion. It's not based in malice. This is just what I think. And if you don't agree with me, I'm fine with that. So it's much harder. If the people that are easiest to cancel are the ones who care about public approval. And no, let me spin this so that I still come out looking good. And no, I apologize. I always get so annoyed when someone will like make a comment and then the next day after the backlash, you know, my words were taken out of context and I apologize. And that's not what I meant. And my heart is and I'm like, just stand by what, at least I would be able to respect you if you're just like, I meant what I said, and that's what it is. And if you don't like it, oh well. Yeah. But a lot of this, very rarely, especially in entertainment, people will stand by what they said. But my favorite thing to say, and in the wise words of Nene Leakes, and I'm sorry if you don't know who that is, but there's a nice, I'm sure if you've seen the GIF, but she goes, I said what I said. And she just leaves it that way. And that's my motto in life.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I, you know, sometimes I say crazy shit and then I backpedal because I'm like, wait a minute. That was totally like, who am I to say something on this subject? But you mentioned that Hollywood is going very much to the left. And I'm just going to drop a book here. I'm not paid for this, but this book is called Diversity Inc. by Pamela Newkirk. And it talks about how there's a lot of inclusivity that is really just a weird mirage. It's smoke and mirrors, and it makes you think that things are more inclusive than they really are, but it's still controlled by a bunch of greasy old white bastards. And that's the way that Hollywood has always been. And that's the way that Hollywood, it still is. It makes you think that it's all about, you know, color and inclusivity and equality, right?
They just canceled the Golden Globes because they didn't have like there's no diversity on their committees. They just canceled the Golden Globes this year for that. So it's
Tom Cruise just gave back all of his awards. He was like Tom Cruise, like crazy Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
If Tom Cruise says something's bad, you know you messed up.
But is that because now and here's where it goes back into the left and the right. The extreme right is control, right? So fascism, control. The extreme left is by the people for the people, but it's bullshit because it's still controlled by people, right, by a small minority. Stalinism, for example, Mao Zedong, they were still calling the shots under the guise of the left. So my point here is that, yeah, sure, you can have this sort of societal canceling effect, but the people that are still making a lot of these big decisions, these corporate folk, are still a small, powerful few. And they're not going to relinquish power, not without a fight. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, you can throw tokenism is not equality. Let's start there.
Right.
So for me, if I really want to see when a company is just like, yes, we're all about inclusion, everything like that. Look at the board of directors. That's how you really know.
Yes.
Then the board of directors
Exactly.
will tell you. And normally 99.999% of the time, when you look at the board of directors, it's just white, maybe one person of color, maybe. Most times, even not one. So it's they'll put, the token people at the forefront. So it's just like, oh, see, look, we have diversity, but the people actually calling the shots look nothing like me or any person of color. So that's how you know when to call bullshit, because it's just like, well, you can talk the talk all you want, but when I'm looking at who is controlling the structure, it has nothing to do with diversity.
Yeah. Well, and there's that other piece of what is it called? Moral suasion or something. It's like, look at this black man. He's so amazing. Why can't you all pull yourselves up by your bootstraps? And it's like, again, we are all uniquely individual people.
Yeah. And let's not act like the system won't let one or two in so they can be like, see, look at Oprah. Yeah. Okay, show me 20 more Oprahs, please. Show me 20 more of those. Oh, well, you look at Barack Obama. Show me 40 other black presidents before that. Show me. You cannot.
Or vice presidents.
Tokenism is not equality, because, and maybe you guys can speak to that for yourselves, but I don't think that if the situation was reversed, that white people would accept one as, well, look, we can all make it. Look at that. It wouldn't work that way. So why for us is it you have the one, be happy with that?
Therein lies the truth. Right? I think you just kind of nailed it, right? If it was reversed, if I was the minority, right? And the government is all, Asian, whatever, it doesn't look like me, I would be like, shit, like, what am I, like, can I even get a break in any of this? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, we see it as different. There's still so far for us to go, but society fears change, because especially, we're talking about the older generations. I mean, it's almost like they're set in their ways and they know it a certain way, and they see these changes coming and they're like, oh my God, where is this going? But the fact is that really, how far have we come? Have we come far?
It's relative, I guess. I mean, progress is not a very quick thing. It's relative. I mean, I think we're certainly doing better in a lot of respects by almost all metrics than the 1950s. Yes. But there's still a lot of stuff, like we'll never, just like humans will, we'll never, there's no such thing as a perfect human. Somebody's cat.
Let's just get you out of there. Sorry, guys. Just walking right through.
But yeah, it's the same thing with the society. There'll never be a perfect society, because you will never be able to please everybody, because I'm sure there are people that don't want it to change than what it is now, because that means relinquishing power. That means the structure has to change. And there are a lot of people who are like, no, this is fine. I'm totally fine with this. So progress is relative.
Now, is that bullying, or is that just maintaining power? Because I mean, what's the difference?
In what regard?
Like the guys, the old, the chairman of the boards, the CEOs that are all controlling everything, and they're putting distractions on us, telling us, oh, you got to cancel that guy, you got to cancel that guy. Really, we should be canceling the people that are in charge of the situation, because I feel like they're bullies. They're keeping the control and the power, and they're not going to let it go because that's just making them money, and having power feels good for a bully.
But you see the distraction. Imagine, like, you see how they do that. Like, oh, focus over there. As soon as you start, exactly. As soon as you start to look in their direction, distraction. Like Harvey Weinstein was so that you wouldn't keep going further. Like, here, let me give you this so that you won't further probe any further. Because if you think that Harvey Weinstein is an anomaly in that entire structure, I can guarantee you all the people at the top have done everything he's done and far worse. But that was like, it was almost like, Derek Chauvin. It's like, here, have this one so that.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
At least you have this.
This is, he's dead to rights. He's dead to rights.
Exactly. So,
no, yeah.
It's a distraction.
I mean, and here's another thing, right? Because legal cases are what can change legislation, right? So, I mean, you think about Brown versus the Board of Education, which tried to end Jim Crow segregation in the States in regards to schools being segregated. And then that was a landmark case that in effect changed legislation. Now with Derek Chauvin, yes, I don't think there's been legislation passed yet, but now with this case, it has in effect changed the way that everything is, right? Now there's this sort of, there's this textbook example, this case of what has happened in this situation and how future situations will be handled. Does that resonate, or?
I mean, it would require people to keep their foot on the neck of this thing, which, and I'm going to get ready to say this, but I truly
go
don't.
For it.
Again, send me hate mail. I don't care. I don't read it. But Black people are very easy. Because I'm going to include myself in this, we are very easily distracted by the little token gifts of here's your equality. So they may or may not pass this legislation, but okay, well, they got Derek Chauvin, so that's good enough. We're very much that's good enough people. And then so when you say to somebody that this is good enough, you will receive what you tolerate. So the problem is that we can protest and everything like that, but once you get that little sort of gift of like, okay, here's your equality, we let off the gas and we stop applying pressure. It's like with all of the I remember when the clothing lines, like whether it was Gucci had blackface on their stuff, there was Prada, there was Montclair, they all had like these blackface images and stuff like that. And I remember all these celebrities in uproar, like, we're boycotting this. And literally 2 months down the line, they're all back to wearing it. And I'm just like, well, what happened there? Oh, well, they said that they were going to have a diversity committee. Did you follow up to check and see if that was true? Of course not. So a lot of the time we're fine with the lip service. We're fine with this is how the sweet words to make it better, but we don't ever follow up to see, well, did they actually do that? Is there actually a change? Is there anybody now on their design team, on their marketing team, that is Black, that is a person of color? How are you going to rectify this? Because, if I can just pay you lip service, why would I ever have to do anything further? I don't want to have to expend energy and time and money and dollars to fixing this problem. So if I can give you lip service, and if you as a community, the Black community spends $1.3 trillion annually in retail. So if we can just give you lip service, same thing with politicians. Politicians, when it's dream, selling season, this is what we're going to do for Black people. Here's our plan for this. And when they're in office, crickets. And we never hold them accountable. So if you can get away with telling people what they want to hear, but never follow up,
they'll keep doing
why
it.
would anything ever change? I can just give you the bare minimum and you're fine with it. So it requires a bigger effort on our part.
Guys, we're running low on time here. Well, actually, over on time. So I'm kind of tie it back in here.
Okay.
But actually, before you do that, go ahead. So the reason why I had this conversation about education is because in our society, again, there's this dichotomy between the extreme left and the extreme right. And as a teacher myself, I'm wondering where it lies in. Do we nurture kids? Do we nurture their individuality? Do we kind of because if we're not careful, is that coddling them? Again, we talk about trauma-informed classrooms, which we never necessarily got to trauma or healing, but we talk about this, right? That's sort of the left side, and that's sort of where we're going. And then on the right side, it's like, you need to prepare yourself for this. You need to be rigid. You need to be tough. And again, I think that both of those aspects, we need to be balanced, right? We can't just be too far on this side. We can't be too far on the right side. I think about my daughter, right? I am, I love that girl so much and I give her hugs and stuff, but the world can be a very dangerous place. And I need to prepare her for that as well. So therein lies kind of the question of moving forward, how do we create a society that's balanced?
And I can take that point. It kind of ties into what I was just about to say, literally.
Wonderful.
We have gotten to a point in our society where we're almost lazy with our education. And it ties back to what Chris said. You can search anything on Google and you'll find a webpage that tells you you're right. So we don't bother to become educated with anything anymore. We don't bother to put the time in to make things work. Like when we were all going through the Black Lives Matter thing, the majority of us put up a black square on our Instagram and we left it at that. And that's because we didn't want to be educated. It was just the norm to what everybody was doing. It was easy. And instead of actually, going to research, looking up things, looking up ways you can help, it was just, this was the easy thing to do. And it kind of, the way it ties into what you're saying is the right and the left, they don't want to learn about each other anymore. They just want to find that Google article that says they're right. And then they want to find their pack mentality that tells them we can cancel the other side because we're with everybody that agrees with us. And this is why we started this show, because we don't just want to sit in the corner, drinking beer on a Friday night, talking about things that we all agree with and not challenging anybody's opinion or not challenging the narrative here.
Yeah, no, I mean, people these days argue to respond, not to listen and understand.
Yes.
So that's the problem. If you are already thinking about the next thing that you're going to say, it means you're not fully listening to what I'm saying, because you need to be right. So needing to be right and a healthy discourse, they don't go together. You should be open to learning. That should be your number one priority. But in this day and age, in this generation, that's not what we're concerned about. We're concerned about, how can I be right and make this person look dumb as hell? That's our number one priority. And you'll never get anywhere that way. So it requires a balance. Like everything in life, you need equal parts of hot and cold, masculine and feminine, hard and soft, to make everything work. And that's how you get back to to balance. And I think as well, you have to make, if we're talking about trauma, you need to make healing your trauma a priority as well, and not have it, people see vulnerability as a weakness when it's a strength, because it builds you up. But that's the thing, you'll never be able to grow when you have the energy of trauma inside you. It's something that you need to work on yourself, because you carry that around in your entire life, and it just manifests itself in many different ways. Sometimes it's in the form of a person that you love deeply, and you wish that it could be other ways, but you have to pay attention to the signs that life is giving you, because life will, when you pay attention, it'll start with a little pebble that it throws at you, and just be at the back of your head, and you're like, what is that? And then if you keep not paying attention, the pebble becomes bigger, and it becomes a rock, and it becomes a brick, and then the whole wall falls down on you, because you're not, you haven't healed what needs to be healed. And I think the biggest thing is that, because I think as people, we want to hold on to relationships and things that no longer serve us anymore, but never become so comfortable with someone cutting you when you love the person that's holding the knife. So when something has outlived its purpose to you and it's hurting you now, that's your responsibility to fix that. And sometimes it just looks like letting go and saying, you know what, this doesn't serve me anymore.
That's a really good point, actually, about responsibility. I mean, you know, everybody has a role to play. And when you can accept your own responsibility in something, that can empower you. It seems that our society loves silencing problems, but not really solving problems.
Distraction.
Right?
Yeah. Well, think about how
distracted.
much it hurts to actually examine, to go to the very root of your trauma, because you've boxed it up around things to not have to look at it. So you've put it behind walls and boxes, and undoing that and those layers, the further you get to the core, becomes more painful. And then a lot of times people don't have the mental fortitude to do, like, you know, in you know, Buddhist teachings, it's like, sit in that feeling. It's not going to kill you. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but imagine now if you work through to the other side, you'll become a better person and you will have healed that. But the problem is, the more layers that you peel back, the more tender and sensitive it gets, and we sort of just are like, I don't want to go any further. I just don't want to, and then you'll never actually reach true healing.
Right.
That's why psychedelics are so good.
I've never tried any. I've never tried.
Oh, we got to solve that problem.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not saying I'm going to help you with that.
Oh, okay.
We're on air here, but we'll talk later.
Yeah, we'll introduce you to a guy.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So
when you do feel trauma, you do legitimately, it physically gets into your cells. So every time it's almost time stamped. So when you're in that situation again, it gets brought right back up. And the only way to get rid of it is, just like you say, is to go right down to the root, or basically to the cell, and get rid of it. And the only way to do it is to experience it again so deeply, but then change your experience when you're back into that situation.
Well, yeah, and I mean, sorry.
There's an example I had heard where a guy in baseball, you know, he's a guy on third base, he had to hit him in. And the first thing his coach said was like, "Hey, we're counting on you right now." And so he went up and he struck out. Well, every single time there was a guy on base, he got nervous, and he remembered his coach going, "Oh shit, like, people are counting on me." He had to go right down to the root and change his mentality when he was up to the plate every single time, and get back to that. He basically had to change his coach telling him, "We need you right now," to something positive, like, "You can do it," or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that goes for all trauma.
Yeah. You have to change it, and you have to also realize that mind is extremely powerful, and the human mind loves familiarity, even if that familiarity is toxic and poisonous to you.
Looks for patterns.
And it's, if you all you know in life is trauma and toxicity, you're still familiar with that, and then the brain just goes, well, it's the devil that I know better than the one that I don't. So a lot of times just think about, I guess, you know, someone who lives in a house that smells really, really bad. For them, they don't even realize that it smells bad because they're in it all the time. And it takes somebody else going, "Why are you living this way?"
It stinks.
Exactly. But if it stinks and it's toxic, if it's familiar to the human mind, it will rationalize it and adjust its vision to that sort of level of dysfunction.
Is that why Cloverdale doesn't stink anymore? Because I live here?
That could be, because every time I drive past it, no.
Yeah, it's terrible, man. It's terrible.
I just want to thank everybody in the comments here. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get to all of them because I'm not the world's greatest multitasker. In fact,
is it only an hour?
It's only, hey, Chris, we're doing this next Wednesday. We're doing this next Wednesday at 8 every week. I'll be here. I really hope that you guys can be here. You like, honestly, guys, thank you so much. Listeners at home, thank you so much. Awesome comments. And then if anybody has a topic that they would like us to discuss, you can email us. Our email is robsprobablywrong@gmail.com. And we will be on YouTube next time. I'm not sure what happened. I love the shirt. Don't put it in the dryer.
Nope.
And thank you guys for your time. Now, I don't like having the last word, so you guys go ahead.
Last word.
Is that it?
The most important lesson you guys can learn is that if somebody disagrees with you, It's okay.
It's
I
okay.
need you to know it's okay. You're gonna
Promise
live.
it's okay.
It'll be okay.
Yes.
I remember what I wanted to say. If you want to heal trauma, this is just my perspective. Love and kindness, gratitude. Find something to be thankful for. Hold on to that thing, right? You know, have a good friend. I got 3 beautiful friends with me right now, and each and every single one of you guys have impacted my life in a way I cannot describe in words, because it would only rob the meaning of it, right? So this last quote I have here is from Forgettable Vendetta, which is through Twitch, which I have no idea how to work Twitch because I'm a fossil. But it says, there's a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. He who does not wish to see the height of a man looks all the more sharply at what is low in him and in the foreground, and thereby betrays himself. Wow. A riddle almost. I love that guy. I am thankful for life, Thomas. I'm thankful for you. Thank you, everybody. And I'm probably wrong about everything.
Good night, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.